I want to start, thank you, Joe. We'll start with this. Seth Wickersham's a very good journalist, and he has these stories where he gets all sorts of insight. And I was reading his story on Tom Brady, and I'm going to read you verbatim a couple of sentences here. He says, Brady was deeply dissatisfied after that Super Bowl loss to the Eagles. He put up 613 yards and no punts. Belichick addressed the team upon its return to Foxborough, and Brady mostly stared straight down, barely glancing up at his coach. Brady told people in the building that day he wasn't coming back. Needing distance, he detached from the team in the spring, left passive-aggressive comments on social media. He pleaded the fifth. ESPN's Ian O'Connor, in his book Belichick, reported that Brady wanted a divorce after that Super Bowl loss from his coach. And Brady made it clear to author Mark Leibovich in the book Big Game that he was fed up with the culture of Belichick. It wasn't fun, it continues on, and Brady didn't feel appreciated. In the words of a confidant, he was like, why am I doing this? Brady needed something new. On Monday night, March 16th, Brady called Kraft. They lived close. He got in his car, drove around the block, and told him, I'm gone. Kraft believed he was coming over to agree to a new Patriot contract. One of the parts, according to this article, is that Bruce Arians has fostered a very fun environment. And this is Colin was right. I kept saying, what I was being told is the two things in my life, the times I have left places of employment, you always end up seeking the one thing your current environment doesn't give you, one or two things. When you read the Seth Wickersham piece, the two things Brady wanted, weapons, Tampa had them, and a little fun. That's what Bruce Arians is all about. So Brady was very human and very common. This is why people leave. What is happening in my current workplace that I can solve? Better players on offense, and lighten up a little bit and put our arms around each other and have an occasional night out. That, according to Seth Wickersham, really was the driving force. It was never money. It was never money. By the way, Tampa is one of the cheapest places in America to live. No state tax. $25 million in Tampa is like $34 million in New York. But here's the thing that I come back to, is whereas Tom Brady has been a different guy in his Patriots day, single guy, married with kids guy, TB12 brand guy, pre-Super Bowl, post-Super Bowl, pre-icon, now an icon. You know, Belichick hasn't changed. And I've seen this my entire career, not only in business and in life, but I've seen this a lot with coaches. The coaches that are rigid and more dogmatic about their style, they don't age as well. I remember as a kid, Frank Kush, football coach at Arizona State, Bobby Knight, Woody Hayes. I think Mike Ditka got very rigid. This is the way I coach. This is the way I do things. I think Greg Popovich is a pretty smart guy, a really smart guy. But his culture turned off Kawhi Leonard, a very modern 2020 NBA star. And when I look at coaches that have evolved, Andy Reid, between Kansas City and Philadelphia, he started really adapting to these college schemes. Coach K at Duke, he was rigid initially and then said, why not get one and done? They're beating me. I'd rather have them and beat other teams. I think John Harbaugh is very much like, you know what, we can't keep doing this pocket quarterback thing. Doc Rivers used to want control over personnel. He gave it up. He said, I'm just going to coach. I got many faults, but when I used to get into this business, I would watch older sportscasters. And I always remember thinking, I don't want to be the older sportscaster that doesn't grow, doesn't get better. I don't want to be the guy that makes a little scratch and thinks, it's over. Keep growing, hire young people, be around young people, evolve as sports evolve. I used to talk a lot more golf. I used to talk baseball 15 years ago. I used to be more college than pro football. And I think it doesn't matter how smart Bob Knight is or Bill Belichick. Belichick has to realize that things change. And one of the things that really changes, not just football, how many times have I had an athlete on and they've said, I like that my coach cared about me. Of course they do. Of course they do. Football's hard. And there used to be a world you lived in where it was, you show up to practice. This culture for Popovich and Belichick was largely carried by two guys, Tim Duncan and Tom Brady. And when Tim Duncan left and was not the centerpiece of the locker room, the next star, Kawhi Leonard, he didn't buy into Popovich. He didn't buy into him. They shipped him off. San Antonio doesn't matter. They're not as good as Utah. They're not as good as Denver. They're not the Lakers. They're not the Clippers. And similarly with Bill Belichick. Don't underestimate. There was that article a couple years ago that, they can win with a lot of people in New England. You're never going to find another NBA guy like Duncan or another NFL player like Brady who is totally willing to sacrifice money in big earning years to basically carry the culture. Not be part of it, carry it. And I think Popovich took it for granted with Duncan, and he had Kawhi Leonard, and Kawhi didn't buy it, and he wasn't flexible. When you have Kawhi Leonard, who's the best get-a-bucket guy in the NBA, you got to be flexible because you're not getting another Kawhi Leonard in the next 4 or 5 years. And I think they've always underestimated in New England. They can release every press release they want. You got to put your arms around athletes a little bit. They want to be liked. They want to be loved. Parcells, Phil Simms came on Friday on this show. It was a great interview. He said Parcells was gruff, but he'd walk up to you once in a while and say, boy, we are lucky to have you. And Simms, I started laughing. Simms said, he would come up to you once a camp and say that. You were so excited. Bill likes me. Bill Parcells, really? That's all it takes. You don't have to tell people all day you love them, but you got to hug them occasionally. Occasionally. I'm all for tough love. But I think there's a little bit of a lack of warmth with Belichick, and I think it wore Brady out. And it doesn't matter. The one thing in my life I've seen over and over again, nothing punctures intelligence and brain power like rigidity. Doesn't mean you have to change your values. It doesn't mean you have to give up on things you believe in. But, man, the world's changing. You can change with it because it's changing. It's regardless of you, it's changing. So you better be able to get on a wave and occasionally ride it. When I moved to Manhattan Beach, California, when I first got there, where I live now, I still do it occasionally, but not as much. I would go down, I'd get a coffee, and I'd go down, and I'd watch the surfers. I'd stand on the pier. Or I'd park my car and I'd watch the surfers. And I'd sit there for a half hour. I'd just sit there and just watch the surfers. It's kind of fascinating. On a Saturday morning at like 5:36, I get up early. And the one thing you noticed about the really good, either body surfers or surfers, they were picky on waves. They were picky on them. But what a good surfer would do is, listen, man, don't waste your time in the crappy waves. But once you have a good wave, you ride it. Let it do the work for you. There's no reason to waste your energy in a bad wave. The really good surfers would sit out there for 15 minutes and ride one. And it's the same thing in life, in football. When you get a good wave, Brady, a Tim Duncan, when they're going to carry a lot of the water for you, appreciate them. Because you don't get many great waves. You can go out in the surf for 90 minutes and get 3 great waves. Take them and ride them all the way in because they don't last, and there's not many of them. You're not going to get another Brady. There aren't many Tim Duncans. You just don't have many Tim Duncans. It's like, I'll take a pay cut. I'm going to win games. And I'm not banging on players who don't do that. Make the money. Make all the money you can. Most guys, though, are not taking big pay cuts. They're not willing to get barked at. They're not willing to carry your water and carry your culture, and you better appreciate it. That is a rare commodity, and that's not a shot at athletes. They have very short shelf lives. They want their money. They want to be treated right, and they deserve to be treated right.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.